So, Dad, why don't you say your name and tell us a little bit about yourself?
That's about it.
Dad, you got to bring the microphone up to your mouth. You don't have to hold it up like that. Here, let me show you.
Here, right here.
Yeah, but no, you want it up.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is there to say at this time?
Well, where were you born? What year were you born?
I forgot.
Okay.
All right, well, you were born in Lithuania, right?
I was born in Latvia. The reason I was born in Latvia is because we were in a very small town, Zadik, Lithuania. And they didn't have a hospital, or, as I understand it, I was a big baby and they needed a hospital for my birth. But of course, we just went there for my birth, and then we came right back to Lithuania. I think shortly afterwards, my father went to this country. But anyway, we were in Lithuania for a while, and my father went, let me backtrack a little bit. He had a brother that was one of about 6 brothers and 1 sister. 1 sister came to this country, Tante Ita. She was Jake Esterson's wife, and she was the only girl. I'm thinking of things that come up.
Some of the other brothers.
Huh?
Do you remember the names of any of the other brothers?
I know there was Abraham.
Moshe.
There was Moshe. Moshe came, and that's another story, came here to this country. But anyway, Louis Marcus was one of the brothers, and he wouldn't learn.
He didn't want to go to a yeshiva.
The reason why they all went to yeshivas, one of the reasons, is because they weren't allowed, Jews were not allowed to go to school past the 3rd grade. So, as Jews, and wanting to learn, not specifically just Jewishness, but just to learn, they developed yeshivas, yeshiva katanas, small ones. And he didn't want to learn, so they packed him up and shipped him to America.
And you know what year this was?
What year he was, I don't know. But my father left in 1920.
When you were born.
1920 was the year that I was born.
And so who came over with you?
Pardon?
Who came over with you?
Well, wait a minute. My father came over first, and he came over with my brother, Gilbert and Morris. Morris at that time was a different picture. He was a tanner, and took leather and processed it somehow. And he had a horse and a wagon, and he had a girlfriend that he was very much in love with. And they whisked him off to this country. Morris wound up being he developed to learn how to be a cutter of clothing. At that time, they would lay up, I don't know how many, let's say 6-8 layers of cloth. And you had a cutting machine, I remember that, and they used to cut it.
They were all working.
They put a pattern on top, you know.
But that was that Louis Marcus Corporation. That was the Louis Marcus. No.
He went to work for somebody, I don't know. He wound up with Jake Esterson. Jake Esterson had a clothing manufacturing place. It was hard work, and there weren't many Jews doing that, which made it even harder for him. He didn't speak the language.
So that's so I understand. So your dad, Uncle Morris, and Uncle Gilbert, those three came over together.
Right.
And then, so who else?
My sister was left, and then I had a brother.
Did you mention her name? Just
Ethel Shoham. She married Rabbi Yechiel Shoham.
So it was your mom who was still in Lithuania, Ethel, and who else?
Michael, and Herschel.
Now, was Herschel the youngest?
Pardon?
Was Herschel the youngest?
I was.
You were the youngest.
I was the baby of the family.
And so how long did you stay there after your dad?
Well, we came over here in 1923, but I wanted to tell you other stuff before.
Oh, okay.
My mother had one sister, and she was married to a Rabbi Heller, and he was a writer, and he was an outstanding man, and he was one of the few Jews that was in the, I think they called it a Duma. A Duma was like the parliament. And the story there was they couldn't have any children. In those days, even today, the law is, or the custom is, that if you can't bear children, regardless of who is responsible, it was reason for divorce. You know, they wouldn't do it, or he didn't want it, and he didn't do it. He was left, and then in 1923, I came over with Michael.
And your mother? Michael and your father.
Herschel was not allowed to come to this country because he was sick. Some of them call it a cancer. Some of them call it like tuberculosis or something with the lungs or something. And at that time, you couldn't come into this country if you. So we went through a lot of hell. I know, I can only tell you, I came over, I was 2.5 years old. So I really don't know. I'm just telling you hearsay.
Ethel stayed.
Ethel stayed over there with my brother Herschel, and she took him to different sanitariums. She played, what's beside a guitar? Mandolin?
Oh, yes, you did play mandolin.
Mandolin. Michael talks about the story about if they went in the backyard and if the Cossacks were coming and they would be flying down with the horses and swords, they had to run in the house right away. It was a hell of a way of living.
Excuse me, Dad. So when you were talking about, so I know what happened with your dad and brothers and then your family. How about your father's brothers? Where did they wind up going? And
One of them went to South Africa.
And who was that?
Nussen, I think. Nussen, but I'm not sure. Nussen. You know, it just came to me, I know it. And there was an Avraham, he stayed in Lithuania. My mother's father, he must have been, like in those days, pretty well off. because he had two son-in-laws that were rabbis. So I guess
That was the
he
Yichus.
bought them off.
Do you know what his name? Do you remember his name?
The only thing I know about his name is the last name was Spittner. Spitner.
I thought it was Spitman.
Spitman. You're right. Thank you. I've never run into a Spitman. Never.
That was your mother's maiden name.
That was my mother's name, so
Spintman.
that was my grandmother.
Right.
Zadie, did your father's brothers also live in the same town that you guys lived, or were they spread throughout Lithuania?
No, they all stayed around there, as far as I know. But I really can't.
But
I don't want to say something.
we don't know anything about them as far as where they wound up. They probably, just wound up getting killed in.
Well, a couple of them got killed as they were going to, they picked them up and put them in trucks. And the Lithuanians were horrible people. In fact, the Germans used them in Poland to be guards because nobody beat their viciousness. But as they were going by in a truck, they were yelling, "You're going to meet your God, you're going to meet your guard tomorrow morning. You ought to be happy," something like that. Bastards.
And then with Herschel, he wound up dying in Lithuania? Or?
Yeah, Ethel stayed with him, and I think he passed away about 1927.
We never know where Herschel was buried.
I have inquired. There was a fellow, he passed away, that had a brother-in-law or sister in Switzerland, and he took care of a lot of the cemeteries in the entire area. And I even told him, if it costs a couple $, go ahead. And he looked all over, and he couldn't find it. Now that's another story. The story is that Ethel, my sister, in order to be able to put him in a sanatorium, he couldn't be Jewish. So she changed names. I don't know. Anything you want to talk about. But anyway, during World War I, they spoke about my mother baked challahs. And I think these two candlesticks were part of it. And they got on a train, and they were running away from the Russians. And the Germans saved them, just the reverse of World War II. And the challahs, they start turning green.
They put
from
silver.
the silver.
They put silver inside the challahs so they could save the. They could
start
save the
turning
silver.
green. But they didn't have anything to eat. So I heard the stories of how my mother took a spoon and she crumbled up, and each one had a ration of that challah, How they hid it or what, I don't know. But anyway, getting back to my father, in 1920, there was one thing about that family. They were very close. My aunt, Tante Ita Esterson, she would do anything for her brothers. And she was very close to us. In fact, I got a bar mitzvah ring. My father wasn't alive then, but she gave me a present. You'll see it, a handmade gold ring, with a little diamond on it.
So she lived in Baltimore?
She lived in Baltimore. She lived on Norfolk Avenue off of Ricestown Road. If you went on her porch, she was in the first house or the last house down. You could see the racer dips going up and down.
Now, Louis Marcus opened up the coat manufacturer.
Louis Marcus worked in a factory, clothing factory.
And that's one of your
And
father's
he met,
brothers.
Yes, he's
and
the
he
one
met-
that came over here by himself because he wouldn't go to the yeshiva. But he opened up this coat manufacturer.
Well, you're ahead of the story. The story is that he worked in this factory. I don't know which one. And he married this woman at that time. I'll tell you her last name. Her first name, Tanteita. Layne was Louis Marcus' wife. What did I just say?
You were trying to think of Lena's last name?
Pardon?
Lena's last name.
Layne's Lipsitz. God damn. I remember that. She was as nice as you wanted. In those days, I can remember. She used to have a white Cadillac with a chauffeur. Don't want no crap. They were something. She used to send them down and
You're getting ahead of the story. Louis Marcus
yeah,
died.
yeah. Louis Marcus was bringing over his brother, which is my father, Joseph Jacob. And on the ship coming to this country, he passed away.
You're talking about
Louis
Marcus
just
passed
passed
Louis
away,
Marcus
so his
Corporation.
brother, so his father never saw him.
He was buried somewhere else, but now he's buried right at the edge as you walk into Bethlehem Cemetery. And he left things for his brother, my father. And my father never got it. And my father never contested it. And his expression was, das ist besser from
Fremde.
Fremde than I'm all from. In other words, it's better from strangers than sometimes the family, because people here in this country just love that man. He was highly educated. He got smicha, which is what's the word for smicha? You got so much to say.
Became a rabbi.
No, smicha, ordained. Ordained by, I remember that.
Soloveitchik.
Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Soloveitchik is the grandfather, the great-grandfather of these Soloveitchiks that have such a great reputation in this country. One of them gave Gilly Shoham, smicha. He taught the highest class in Yeshiva University. He lived in Boston, and in his later days, the yeshiva used to send a student or students to Boston to bring him down and to bring him back. And when he gave a shiur, it's not a sermon, like a lesson or something. It's higher than a shiur. People from all over used to come to see him, to hear him.
So basically, then Aunt Ethel came over.
Ethel was still there. She was there with my brother.
Right, but after your brother died, she came over.
No, she went back to Lithuania, and she was with a couple of her uncles. One of them, I think, is Avraham, which is my father's brother, Avraham. And they made a shidduch with Yechiel. They also came out of
Slobodka
Slobodka Yeshiva. I haven't talked so much in the past 10 years. It's
You wanna take a
exhausting.
break?
How do you do it?
Well, do you want to take a break?
Yeah,
So hand it over to Mom. Okay.
Did you want?
Dad, excuse me, Jared wanted to ask you something.
Zane, I know we started to talk about this, but I just wanted to go back to it. Could you?
but you know how to put it on.
You should fire him.
You want me to hold it?
No, not at all.
That's
That's not going anywhere.
Zadie, could you talk a little bit more about the town that you were born in, and the town that you were born in, and just some of the circumstances for why?
I don't know anything about the town.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you heard from your
I can tell you about the house, which I heard.
Yeah, no, that's fine, yeah.
Talk about the house we had. We had a cow, and they put the cow in, next to the kitchen. Why did they put the cow in there? The winters were cold. You didn't have a heated house like you know it today. So they had this cow in the kitchen, and they were right next to the kitchen, and they milked the cow, and that was their milk. Now they also had chickens, and Michael always talked about that was his job, to go around getting the eggs from the chickens, and feed them, etc. So, we were self-sustaining, but it wasn't luxurious.
Now, was your dad did he have a shoal there in Lithuania, or?
He had a shoal there. Yeah. He had a shoal there in, where did I say we came from?
Slovakia?
No.
Scooter.
Sadiq?
Sadiq.
You don't know the name of the shoal, do you? And so why, he had an established shoal, why was everybody leaving?
Because of terrible times with the Russians at that time.
I told you they weren't trained.
In fact, I had heard that between Mars and Gilbert, they had to change their birth dates because the Russians were taking in these young boys into the army, and they
once you got in, you couldn't get out.
So they actually falsified their birth dates so that one would be younger, and he was too young to get into the service, and that's why that was how they were.
There had been a lot of bribery.
So I'm sure, and they both came over here like the same age, that kind of thing. That was all falsified.
So you guys all ended up in Baltimore?
Baltimore.
That's where
the uncle was.
That's where Lewis Marcus
Lewis
was.
Marcus was.
But Zadie, you went through Ellis Island, though. You came in
Yeah. I always wanted to go back to Ellis Island to see if my name was there.
I never saw it.
You were there?
Yeah, years ago.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I wonder if it was under the name Fievel. Were there any Marcuses?
If I saw Bible, I would have known that was you.
So I don't know.
Okay, so your family finally unites. So you've been apart from each other for years.
3 years.
3 years. And how did your dad wind up getting a shul, Michigan Israel?
Michigan Israel. Well, first of all, don't forget I came over, I was 2.5 years old. I really don't.
And when Ethel came over, she was already married.
She married in Europe.
So when you were here, when you came to Baltimore, did your dad already have a shul, or did it start after that?
No. Well, no, he came here to this country, and his brother passed away. But there's one thing, none of the Marcuses that I know of are lazy. And
Didn't he teach?
He taught at the Hebrew college, and later on, I don't know if you got it here, he was head of the top, like the Gemara class. And you know who was a student of hers? Aaron Goldberg's mother. She was a student.
Rabbi Marcus.
She called me over.
So that he did. That's what he probably did. He was a teacher at that time before Michigan Israel was formed. Now, Michigan Israel, was that a shul?
Michigan Israel was in somebody's cellar or something.
I see.
Like
so
that.
it had gotten started
exactly
before your father took over.
And then they started. He became the rabbi, and they started building the shul. And
where was it located?
Madison Avenue, 2257 Madison Avenue. Madison Avenue was named after President Madison.
And so, what were your other siblings? I know you were saying Morris was a cutter. What was Gilbert doing?
Gilbert went to Yeshiva University. He went to teachers' school. He got a diploma as a teacher. He was a teacher for a while.
Then he went into business for himself.
And then Michael, he went through college. He went to...
Farmers. He went to
no, wait a minute. He used to wait on tables in the summertime. The day school was over, he was in Spring Valley, New York. Then I think he transferred somewhere else. And he had a hell of a good time. Worked like hell. And he stayed there until the last day to make a couple more tips of the people that remained in Atlantic City, or Spring Valley, or wherever it was. He used to stand on his feet all day, waiting on tables, and dance with the girls half the night on. He was a gigolo.
Now, how come he was the only one who went to college?
Well, they all went. Morris was too old already, and Gilbert went to, Yeshiva University, and I didn't go, and Ethel didn't go.
And so Ethel, did she ever?
But she couldn't. She was either taking
She
care.
was the, after, as soon as his father died, Ethel and Yafil, they had a shul in Spring Valley.
Yeah.
Before they came here to Baltimore. Their
Spring
children.
Valley, New York? Where's Spring Valley?
Where is Spring Valley? Is that New York?
Up in New York.
Is it New York? And when his father passed away, then Yafil came in and took over the Michigan Israel.
As a boy, I really went through a lot. I remember I was in Spring Valley, and my father and my mother went to Asbury Park, New Jersey, or something like that. Well, anyway, he was putting on his tefillin, and he got a stroke. He passed away there, and of course they called Ethel and Yafil, and we got in a car, and Benny was driving, Benny Koppel. And we were going up there. And all of a sudden, a policeman stopped us. And he came over. He said, "I'm sorry to have to tell you, but I was told to try to stop your car to let you know that he died." What the hell did they have to tell us that? Could have waited until we got it. But I mean, all those kind of crap.
Philip was 12 and a half years old when his father died, so it was like 6 months before his bar mitzvah.
I remember, he's being a gun and everything. And Madison Avenue. Not in Madison Avenue, White Lock Street. Oh, I don't know.
What,
I'm mixed up.
what were you going to say?
But anyway, I remember there was a stair coming down, leading into the kitchen. And you could walk through and walk in the kitchen. And they were working on his body, and I opened the door to look, and then they shoved me back out there.
Mm.
From day one.
Hey, Dad, what was the address that you lived at on Whitelock Street?
813 Whitelock Street. We first moved into 815 Whitelock Street, and we rented. And then 813 was being sold, and we moved into 813.
And so were all the brothers and Ethel and Yechiel, were they all living with you, or did they live separately?
Yechiel lived with us at first. And he got a job pretty soon in Spring Valley. But then after my father passed away, Ethel wanted to come back to Bolton.
So they all lived together on Whitelock Street.
So it was you, Michael, Gilbert, Morris?
No. Morris was married. No. We were all living together.
Until Mars got married.
Morris got married.
That must have been quite a household. There's a lot of people in that house.
When Mars got married, while he was under the chuppah, that's when a brother of
my
father's passed
Morris.
away here. That was Gilbert Marcus's father, the printer, and Ethel Rothman's father.
The wedding went on.
He died during the ceremony?
He died.
He was in a hospital. He was 40-some years old.
And
So he wasn't at the wedding.
No.
He was in the
But
hospital.
he died. It's not a hospital on
But they
Layne
called
Street.
and said that he had passed away, so all the festivities stopped. And they just, got married, and that marriage was not good from the get-go. It was not.
How long, do you know how long he was married before they got divorced?
Oh, it was quite some time.
Well,
It was quite some
they
time.
had 4
There was
children.
Katie, and there was the
Joseph.
twins.
And the twins.
The
They had
twins?
4 children.
Joseph.
Yeah.
Yeah, Joseph and
How long would that be?
well,
How long does that take?
I guess they were, in the teen years or whatever. I can. I'm sure. Okay. Just.
Just
Put it back on. I'll
got it.
talk.
no,
into it.
Rob. What to?
Oh, your turn?
What do you want me to say?
What's your turn?
You gonna ask me?
Here, let me put this on you.
No, I want to. We'll both talk. but
Okay.
I want you to hear.
Okay. Gilbert and Michael were not in the World War II. I think,
I was the only one.
yeah.
I was the only one.
Gilbert was he ill or something? I've forgotten what that was. But I know Michael had his drugstore, and he was really exempt because of the amount of prescriptions.
He was considered a critical place to get medicine. In other words, you could get medicine 24 hours.
So,
And they made him come down and show him, that's the draft board, how many prescriptions he filled.
so he,
But he was already in his 30s.
was he?
Well, if I was in my 20s, he was
Yeah.
10 years my
Yeah,
senior.
he was in his 30s. That's
In
right.
his 30s.
Okay. So,
Well, anyway, I want to go back to speak to about my father. He was educated in Knesset Yisrael branch of Slobodka Yeshiva.
Let me put this back up. So, make sure you're heard.
Under the tutelages of the famous Alter Rabbi Nosson Zvi Finkel. Finkel was a big man those days. He was known, talking about my father, he was known in the yeshiva as Yankel. Yankel comes from Yosef. Yankeler Basigoler. And was referred to as Basigoler Eloi. Eloi is like a top student. He received smicha, in other words, he was ordained from Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik of Brisk, B-R-I-S-K, which was a very rare distinction. In other words, he didn't give out many smichas. You know, most of them got it from Finkel. My father got it from Soloveitchik. And also from Rabbi Eli Baruch Kamai, K-A-M-A-I, the rabbi of the scholarly town of Mir. I don't know if you all have heard of Mir Yeshiva. His ordination from these two rabbinic authorities was quite unique. The family of his wife, Alta Sarah Rivka, also was surrounded with Torah mitzvahs. Oh, here it is. After his ordination, Rabbi Yaakov served as rabbi in the town of Zedek. That's exactly what we said, Lithuania. In 1920, he immigrated to the United States through the help of a brother and was joined by several members of his family. His Rebbetzin Alta and sons, Moshe, Gedaliah, Michal, and Feivel. A daughter Ethel and young son Herschel remained in Switzerland due to ill health of Herschel. Ethel married Rabbi Yechiel Dov Shoham, and they came to the States in 1927.
Hey, Dad. I also want to make sure I get Mom's stuff, because you already mentioned all those things to us. Was there anything else in there that we didn't discuss?
Wait a minute, yes.
What? Hey,
Wait a minute.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, we can always go back to that.
He taught Torah to many organized classes and was a member of the curriculum of Baltimore Hebrew College as instructor in Talmud.
Okay.
All right,
That's
so,
about it.
Dad, let me get this. I got it. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so, Mom, where'd your family come from?
My father, actually, I don't know a lot about. My sisters and I.
You know he came from Lithuania.
My sisters and I always kept saying we never set Papa down to talk, and we're very sorry about that. But we know that he went to Slobodka Yeshiva in Lithuania also, but he never graduated. He did not get smicha, but he was always a very learned man, and through his whole life, there was always a book in front of him, and yeshiva boys would come over and learn with him and all that sort of thing.
And what was his last name?
Mazur, M-A-Z-U-R.
Okay, and how about your mom?
My mother's name was Cohen. My mother's father,
Was it spelled a different way?
C-O-H-N. Sometimes we've seen papers where they signed it C-O-H-E-N and sometimes C-O-H-N.
They would actually sign it differently?
I don't know, with my grandfather coming over here.
Oh, wait a minute, so back up, wait a minute, so your grandfather came here.
My grandfather came here. Okay, I can just tell you that my grandfather,
On your mother's side?
my mother's side, I don't know too much about my father's side. My grandfather on my mother's side was married in Lithuania and had 4 daughters. And his wife died. And at that time, in those days, if there was a single sister from the dead
It's the
child,
law now.
so my grandfather married my grandmother, who was about maybe 18, 19 years old at that time, and her stepdaughter, her niece, maybe was about 16 or 17. So it was a large difference in their ages. But they got married. And my mother's name was Sarah, and I'm pretty sure that she was named for the wife of my grandfather who passed away.
May I interject
Yes.
that it's the law now that if a wife dies and she has a single
Sister.
sister, if they agree, they can marry. If they don't agree upon the marriage, they have to have a get. And I've seen several of them,
Really?
you know, where
You feel?
she spits on them like,
I don't, whatever.
and they
Okay.
have a sandal, a shoe, and she throws it at them.
Oh.
It's a whole ceremony.
Alrighty, so my grandfather came over here. I don't know what children he brought here at that time. I think he brought them all. My mother had her brother Charles.
Mom, do you want to mention who Brian Bear and Sarah's, because I have this listed, who their children were?
Well, there was,
Lisa and,
oh, you mean the 4 daughters?
yeah.
The 4 daughters. One was Zisa Friedlander. One was Ida, and and
Abrams.
Fanny, Abrams, Fanny, Lavin, and Annie Gordon. Those were,
So they came over as single young girls?
I think so. The whole family
And they also
came.
came to Baltimore.
And they all came here to Baltimore.
And do you know why Baltimore?
I don't know why Baltimore. But by the way, we know that my father came here in 1905. My grandfather, my mother's father, came over in the early 1890s because I have in here someplace, he became a citizen in about 1895. So they were here very early. I know my mother was born in Europe. I think that her younger siblings, like Aunt Jenny, was born here in America.
And who were her siblings?
Her siblings were,
And then he married Etta.
and then he married my grandmother Etta Cohen. Etta, Etta had my mother, had Uncle Charlie, had Uncle Nathan, and Aunt Jenny, and Sam. Thank you, and Sam.
And they were born here?
I don't know. Some of them I know. I think my mother was born in Europe.
You mentioned Nate.
Nathan, yes, I mentioned Nathan Cohen. So they were all. They came here in the early 1990s. I don't know. 1890s. I do not know. I know my father, when he came here at first, he was in a little town called Bird's Nest in Virginia, working for somebody down there. How he came back up here to Baltimore and how he met my mother, I do not know. But my uncles, my Uncle Sam and my Uncle Charlie and Nathan, they opened up a little store in Oxford, North Carolina. And Mama, who was always such a business lady, she would go down there to help them in the store. Meanwhile, she was engaged to my father for almost 3 years, they say, because Mama couldn't get married in around Christmas time. They were too busy, and they couldn't get married around Easter time because they were too busy. Finally, they got married in 1910. October the 16th, 1910.
1910.
That's when Mom and Papa got married.
Did your father have siblings?
My father had some siblings. I know Uncle Morris lived with us. He had a brother. There was another brother here, Bernard, and we were just never close we were close with Uncle Morris because he lived with us, but we were never close with the other side of that family.
That was Bernard Mazer.
Bernard, yeah. And a Ben, yeah, but I really don't know.
Have you any idea why you wouldn't have any contact with
I don't know. I have no idea. It was all Mama's side of the family. That's all.
That's always the case.
Not exactly. But I know they got married in 1910, and they moved directly to Burlington, North Carolina, and opened up a store there. And that's where all 6 of us were born. All my siblings and me were all born in Burlington. And
so you never lived in...
I lived in Oxford because I was 6 months old when we moved to Oxford. But so that was I was born in 23, so we moved to Oxford in 23, and we stayed there until 1930.
Bobby, can you name your siblings and order of their age?
My sister Marion was my first sibling. She was born in 1911. Then Buddy, and was born 2 years later. Sister Ruth Friedman, sister, was born 2 years after that. My sister Frumma was born 2 years after that. All every 2 years. Then they say that my mother had a miscarriage, so my brother Irving was born 4 years after Frumma.
I wonder if there was another Bernard somewhere in your family, if you have an Uncle Bernard, and your family...
I don't... Uncle Buddy.
Right. So I'm just wondering, because there are 2 with the same name, I wonder if there's another relative.
I think maybe that went back to another generation that I have no idea about. And so we were all, and then we moved to Oxford, North Carolina, and then then they opened up the C&M hosiery mill there.
Now, was that with the brother? Was that with Nathan? Was that with?
Yeah, it all started. My father. What they actually did, there was a big hose manufactory called
Interwoven.
Interwoven. It was a big hosiery manufacturer. And from what I understand, my father went there and got scraps from Interwoven, and they opened up their own business, and they put together hosiery that were not first class. It was like second class hosiery. Irregulars, that's right. But that irregulars became a big business. My uncle traveled down to Puerto Rico and sold hose down there, and just for a while it was a big business. They moved it up here to Baltimore, and it was on Hanover Street, and it was still a big business. C&M hosiery mills.
So they would take these scraps and actually
made hose out of them. Mm-hmm.
And so this was your dad and his brothers.
My dad and his brothers-in-law.
Brothers-in-law, right?
Right. My dad and his brothers-in-law. And
why? So why did they decide to move out of?
Out of Oxford?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. There were a lot of tales that I had heard, and one was the fact that my sister Marion had already gone off to college. My brother Buddy had already gone off to college, and I think that they also and the uncles also had children, but I think that my parents were maybe a little afraid that they were not going to meet the right people. So Oxford was not a place to rear a nice Jewish family. Now, in Oxford, my father he really wasn't a rabbi, but he did conduct all the services, and people would come from all around, and they would have the services right in our house in North Carolina. Go ahead.
Okay, and Bobby, didn't you say that there were two Jewish families down there that didn't get along?
The foxes and the wolves, yeah. They didn't get along too well. But then there were the Bergens that we met in Oxford. There was another family of Jewish people there.
Papa also did the shvita, didn't you have shvita?
Yes, he came up here to Baltimore, and he learned how to kill chickens properly. So they could eat the chickens. I mean, he never killed beef, but he did kill chickens. So they would eat that.
And who were some of the children of your uncles?
Let's see, Uncle Sam, he was the oldest, I think. I don't know, maybe Mama was the oldest, but Uncle Sam had 7 children. Miriam Cummins, Shirley Lessons, you have it all. Bernie Cohn.
Was there a guy in Virginia? The guy who used to come up here every once in a while. I think it was one of those cousins. He was in the insurance business or something, maybe?
I never heard of Virginia.
Somebody in Virginia.
Oh, somebody in Virginia that would come up here. Maybe that was...
He was a really nice guy. I kind of remember meeting. He was a really nice guy.
I don't
then there
know.
were people from Silver Spring area. Was that part of that family?
I don't know. I don't know.
The daughters were into transcendental meditation. The kids might have moved to Boston. There was somebody in Silver Spring.
Well, that's Silver Spring. That's Carol Mazeroff. Yeah, Carol Mazeroff. Carol and Saul Feinblum, but she was a Mazeroff. She was my Aunt Jenny's youngest daughter. And then there was Sissy, who was also, her name was Ruth, and they call her Sissy. She's still living in over in Silver Spring someplace. I talk to her every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And then there was Hilda. Hilda was part of that family. Morton Cohn and Bernie Cohn. There were 7 children in that family.
Bernie Cohn, where did he live?
He lived here and in Florida, and his wife is still living.
Which one is married to the guy that has this casino?
Oh, that's Siddharthi. She was Uncle's. Yeah, she was Uncle Sam's daughter.
But can you talk a little bit about your house down in Oxford?
Of course, I was very young. The only thing I remember was that it was an old colonial mansion that set back from the street, and they tell me that the kitchen was separated from the house when it was first built because the slaves would use the kitchen and then bring the food in. But my parents connected the kitchens there. I remember there was like a tobacco warehouse right up the hill from us.
Can you say something about bullet holes from the...
That's from the Civil War. That's why somebody had told me that. I don't remember it, but that was somebody had mentioned that. In the Civil, it became, one time I was down there with my mother and I saw the house. It was, at that time, was an old veterans home. But the next time we went down there, the house was gone completely.
Wasn't there something with the phone book, or?
I have a telephone book from Oxford, North Carolina. 216W was our number.
216W.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that was our number in the telephone book.
You don't remember the name of the street, or?
Where is it?
It's around here someplace, huh?
In the trunk of your car.
No. I'm not sure. I think it was like a Williamsburg Street. But they had a store on Main Street. That's where their store was. And the picture that we've got in the dining room of the next door neighbor, Mr. Foster, who was very enterprising in his advertising. So this picture I have in my den, Alex. And they used to tell me that this Mr. Foster would advertise, very enterprising. He advertised that they were going to give away a white baby. So the picture in there shows like the whole town came out to see this, and in his store says, "I want a mama." And they gave away a white baby pig. So I had heard that story, through the years. And one time when Daddy and I were down in Oxford, we went to, this was Burlington rather, we went to the newspaper and we asked if there was anybody there who knew Burlington before 1923. And they sent us to this old gentleman who was recreating old Burlington and had that picture. I was so excited. So it's hanging in my den. You'll have to look at that.
If you want to mention, this is Chaim Bear and Etta Cohn, their children.
Chaim Bear and Etta Cohn. Their children was Sarah, Sam, Charles, and Nathan, and Jenny. Yeah.
And then here are the children for each of them.
Of each of them? Oh, my goodness. Okay. All right, Sarah. Okay, my sister Marion, Buddy, Bernard. Marion was married to Paul Schenker. Buddy was married to Sylvia Siphon, thank you. Ruth Cohen was married to Henry Cohen, and then to Lou Weiss, and then to Ed Friedman. Unfortunately, she was married 3 times. Mildred and Michael Marcus, and Irving and Harriet Blumberg, her name was, and Bluma, Judith, and Philip Marcus. And then there was Samuel Cohn. There was Miriam and Buddy Cummins, Hilda and Sidney Sachs, Sylvia and Ted Bloom. I should put my glasses. Give me my glasses.
I got it.
Bernie and Sylvia, Morton and Phyllis Cohn, Gloria Fratkin, and Shirley and Aaron Lessons. And then there was Uncle Charlie and Sadie Cohn. And their children were Howard Lee and Ethel, Elaine and Fred Mizels, Harvey and Barbara, Nathan, and then Nathan and Ethel were my uncles. And their children was Irma and Irv Fishbein. They just had that one daughter. And then Jenny and Uncle Will Masaroff. There was Marion and Marty Sofer, and Ruth and George Fine, and Bert and Leila Masaroff, and Carol and Saul Feinblum. Those were the children of my grandfather. Okay.
So you guys moved back to Baltimore?
In 1930, we moved back to Baltimore.
Okay.
And
I was just going to ask, did your parents ever talk about what life was like in North Carolina being Jewish?
the only thing I heard was there was never one bit of anti-Semitism that they encountered. My father was very friendly with the Catholic, whatever it was. In fact, they used to learn together. And I had never heard of any anti-Semitism down there.
In fact, he became a Mason there.
He became a Mason down there, which is sort of unusual for a Jewish man.
And so at what age did you move to Baltimore?
I was almost 7,
7.
and that was 1930. That April that we moved in here was right before Pesach. That's when my grandfather died. So I really never knew my grandfather that much.
And what was his first name again?
Chaim Bear.
Chaim Bear. And do you know what he did?
Chaim Bear, I think, was just a entrepreneur. I think he bought and sold and bought and sold, and that's the only thing that I remember hearing.
So he stayed in Baltimore.
He's always there. They all stayed. Yeah,
He never moved down.
He did not move out. No, he did not move out. But his sons went down to Oxford and opened up the store first, and then we moved to Burlington. But then we moved back to Oxford. And
Did you know her?
yes, I knew my grandmother.
What was she like?
An old lady. I was young. She was just an old lady. She used to come very often to our house. I remember helping her taking a bath, And
Grandmother?
yeah, Etta. Very often. They lived on Hanover Street, directly across the street from the shul.
Which shul?
It was
Hanover Street.
the Hanover Street shul, which was Eitz Chaim. I have records of my grandfather donating a Sefer Torah to the shul, and they had a big to-do at that time with that. And my grandmother stayed there after he died. I remember my sisters going down there and staying with her over Shabbos sometimes. I never did. And then she died in 1935.
Where's the Torah?
I have no idea. I have no idea where that Torah is today. The only thing I know is that maybe it's with it's with this shul, because that Eitz Chaim became the Liberty Jewish Center. Oh, and then he also donated a light, an everlasting light, eternal light. Where? Yeah, and he donated that to the shul on Eitz Chaim. And that little light, I'm sure you remember, it came with, it passed down to Liberty Jewish Center, because that was the same name. And then it became this Moses Montefiore that is still in there. And that little light, that little eternal light, is still hanging in their Beis HaMedrash.
Really? Is there a name?
Yes, yes. In fact, my cousin called the president of the shul. He said, wait a minute, let me get a ladder. And he got up there, and my grandparents' name are on that little...
So what did it say? You know what it said?
Yeah, it said Chaim Bear and Etta Cohen.
Wow.
Would you
C-O-H-N?
Huh?
Would you call and ask if the Torah is there?
But they couldn't.
I don't think they could identify it anymore. I really wouldn't know that.
So how did Aunt Firma and Uncle Michael get together?
That I have no
I
idea.
can tell you.
Can you?
Sam Sher.
Sam Sher?
I think so.
I don't know that. I know we did, through Sam Sher, but I don't know from and Michael.
So, wait a minute. So who was Sam Sher?
Sam Sher was... He was a landsman. He was just I don't think they were really relatives, but I think maybe his wife.
Landsman.
Yeah, whatever it was, they played poker on Saturday night. That's for sure. And he was very friendly with the Marcus family and also the Mazer family, and he knew them both. Now, I don't know. I never heard that with Sam Sher with From and Michael. But of course, with us, I'm sure I've told you that story.
Well, here.
That when Daddy came home from the Navy, I used to, of course, while he was in the Navy, I wrote to him all the time.
How did you guys know each other?
We met when Firma and Michael became engaged. And Philip came into the house for the engagement party.
So while they were dating, you guys never met?
While they were dating, I never met Philip. No. But when they became engaged,
Man, she looked good to me.
Philip walked in, and he was really cute. He was a cute little fellow, very shy, very shy. And then he went off to the service shortly after.
1 second. So do you know how long Furman and Michael dated?
It wasn't too long.
I don't think it was too long at all. I think that they sort of knew each other, but they didn't date, and then they did date, that kind of thing. I don't think that they were engaged too long.
Bobby, just to take a big step back, because I feel like we went pretty quickly. Can you guys both talk about what it was like for your families during the Great Depression?
Nobody knew the Great Depression in my household. Whether they had a lot of money or not, I don't know. We never lacked for anything. We just never missed anything. I never felt any depression in my house. There was always someone living in, taking care of the house. My mother was always out buying properties downtown, and she had all these little properties that she owned. She would pick up people from the street and go in and clean them up and then rent them out. My father had this little store. After he left the C&M hosiery mills, he left the C&M hosiery mills because my brother Buddy went into, they thought, competition to C&M. And so there was a little to-do in the family. And Papa left. And he opened up a little store on Baltimore Street. He used to say, I gave out about $25 for tzedakah today, and I took in about $15. So it was a place that he went to. My sisters used to take him downtown to stay in the store, and then they would pick him up. So that it wasn't, and then, okay, so.
And I remember, you want to tell the story? Remember when I accidentally, not accidentally, I locked the safe?
You locked the safe downtown, which was evidently never locked.
I was playing with it, locked it, and nobody had the combination.
Nobody, there was never a combination on it, so they had to get Papa had to get a locksmith to get the safe open. Yeah, I sort of remember that.
So, during the days when you were a kid, what would you do?
When you say I was here, you mean as a child? When I was a kid,
yeah.
It's hard for me to even recollect that because I don't have that kind of memory. We were outside. We certainly never went to a camp. We had friends. I had friends all the time. Miriam, of course, was like a sister to me. We were together all the time. And then going to school, I joined the sorority. I had parties. When all this was going on in Europe, and I'm a teenager here, I had no idea of the extent of all the horror going there. And I'm just having a good time here in Baltimore with my friends. I had a lot of friends. None of them are around.
So,
did you guys have a radio in the house?
We had a radio in the house. Yes, we did.
And did you listen to FDR when you were kids?
I imagine so. I hardly remember. That's 1932.
I think WCAO.
Yeah, I was 10 years old. I didn't have the feeling of all that trauma because I was.
I never missed a radio.
Yeah.
Never had one.
You never had one, you never felt deprived through depression or anything. We always had plenty to eat.
I used to go out to Jordale Park.
You
could play indoor.
Yeah, he had a park. I didn't even have a park to go to, but I remember playing a lot of marbles and playing hopscotch on the.
I never felt like I lacked anything.
And I never felt I lacked anything.
I wanted to go to the movies. So Saturday night after Shabbos, I used to go down the corner. The guy used to give me 5, 6 papers, something, and they would let you jump on the trolleys
Let me pin this one on you.
They would let you jump on the trolleys, and I used to sell the papers. What were they then? I was already getting up there. I think it was 3 cents. Used to be 2 cents. But anyway, I used to sell the papers, and as soon as I made enough money to go to movies, I gave them back the papers and paid them for the papers. And I went to the movies.
Do you remember what kind of movies you used to watch? Did they have those? Like,
Tom Mix,
Yeah, they had a lot of Tom Mix.
Cowboy.
Yeah, cowboys and Indians.
So I didn't miss anything, but I never had it.
And of course, my having all my 4 sisters, I was always well dressed. I didn't have any problem there. And, you know, I was the baby in the family, and
Dad, talk about the household with Ethel's kids in the house, and maybe some stories with Billy and Sydney.
tell them about when you sent Gilly down. You want me to tell them?
But, you know, you were talking about the household. I had a bed. I used to take the coal out the sidewalk for the guy to pick up. And they used to dump the coal in the house. I put it in there. I had to clean out the refrigerator. In the summertime, you used to have ice put in. You didn't have a refrigerator. And I used to pick it up and take it out the back.
It was an ice box.
Ice box, they used to, but water would drip down. So that was part of my job. Always had those kind of jobs. And as far as food you take on the Sabbath, we had a trawling. There was a lot of beans, and I imagine inexpensive meat, potatoes.
But then you lived in the house with Ethel and Yechiel, and then all the children, so you were very close with Sydney and Gilly.
That's true.
That's, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So
But
that's,
Faye, she was in a world of her own. Didn't have much to do with it. That's a girl.
He's like a big brother to Sydney and Gilly, you know.
I can tell you they talked about Sydney's the only one left. I got a job in the summertime in a toy factory. Atlas Toy Factory. They made wagons. The boss came down from New York, and I spotted him. And I started working like hell. And then he left, and he told them to fire everybody but me.
Really?
Yeah, because I was working.
Oh, because you were.
But then my first pay, I came home, and I gave them all 50 cents.
Oh.
Sydney talks about it.
Yes. And then one time he sent, they lived near a drugstore, and Philip wrote out a check for 5 cents and gave it to Gilly to go down to the drugstore to get an ice cream. So Gilly walks into the drugstore with a check for 5 cents. And he was a little embarrassed.
So you guys met at the engagement party.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
where was the party?
In my parents' home.
4401.
4401. It was such
Forest
a
Park,
beautiful home. It was, everything in that house was just, I loved my home. All these wood, now, you ever remember in the dining room, everything was the wooden cabinets and everything like that. And then,
why was that? A very wealthy man now.
built the house and brought everything in from Florida, they said, and built the house.
And he went bust during the Depression.
Yeah.
And they bought it for $5,000.
About
wasn't it?
$5,500, I think the house was bought for.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah, whatever.
Bubby, would you guys have big Passover Seders at your house?
Oh, my
Oh, yeah.
God.
Yes, we would. Yes, we would.
So would the Mazer family come over for that, or?
Not the Mazer family. It was just all us.
Well, you were the Mazer family.
I know, but I mean, not my father's, nobody from my father's family outside of Uncle Morris. It was all...
How don't we call Uncle Morris even?
Sure, Mark. Well, the big picture of that one Seder, Morris is in that picture.
And what's the name? Not Joplin. Yeah, they used to play poker.
Whatever. So then that's when Philip went off to the service, and I used to write to him all the time.
Wait a second, just back for 1 second. So you guys met at the engagement party at your house.
Right.
And did you guys have like a long conversation? What was that like? Do you remember?
I don't remember too much, but I guess we did talk. But he was very shy, and we would sometimes just meet downtown at Michael's drugstore. We never really dated that much before you went into the service. No, he didn't.
Well, Dad, what were you doing at that time before you went into the service?
I was working, that's all I know. And I don't even... Oh, I worked for Herbert Manufacturing Company. Sold linings and...
Yeah, I don't know.
Stuff like that.
All right, so when he came home from the service...
And what year was that?
Came home in 44. End of 44. That was after Layne. Then you had to go back out to California, and you were operated on in 45. I guess he was discharged in 45 sometime, 1945.
October 45.
And he came home, and he really needed a lot of help emotionally, which he never got. So he would drink a lot, sleep a lot, and that's about it.
Had a good time.
And I said, this is not for me. I just didn't want that. So I didn't see him for about 9 months. Then one day, Sam Scher, you ever heard of Bernie Scher? He's got an optical place. Well, this was his father.
I guess it's his grandfather, though.
Well, Sam was Bernie's father, I think. Whatever. So Sam Scher came to me and said, Philip really does love you. Would you go out with him if he would call you? Okay. He goes and tells Philip the same thing. Bluma really does love you. She really wants you to call her.
It was Defender's Day.
Okay. So you called me. It was in October sometime, and that was it.
Now, were you seeing anybody else?
I never had a Saturday night without a date. I had to admit that. Even during the war. After I came home from my dates, I would write.
Girls got to do what a girl's got to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so you went downtown to volunteer at a hospital.
I worked downtown I started to work at the Social Security Board, and I was just going to back up a little bit because I started dating when I was 14 years old to this fellow he was 16 years old and had a car. That was a big deal. So I went out with Hilford on Friday night and Marshall on Saturday night. Anyway, that really threw my whole teen years. Then I went to work at Social Security Board, and then during the war, the Veterans Administration opened up downtown. So a few of us from Social Security went over to the Veterans Administration, and that's where I worked until I stopped. But while I was working at the Veterans, it was during the war that I would go into University Hospital and volunteer in the children's ward. So that I did for a few years. And then after we got married, I still worked until I guess I became pregnant, and then I stopped.
I was going to say, Bubby, speaking of downtown, can you tell the story about your driving test?
Much.
It's a good story.
All right. I don't remember. I think one of my friends, I think it might have been Hilford, who really taught me how to drive. So I went down to take my driver's test. and it was downtown at that time. And of course, the fellow who was giving me the test was sitting alongside of me, but I was looking in the mirror in the back and looking behind me, and there was obviously a nice young lady, and there was a nice young fellow standing behind me going while I was parking. Come this way and come this way. So I was able to park perfectly, so I got my driver's license. I never did find out who he was.
And Dad, so when did you decide to enlist?
The day after.
Pearl Harbor.
Pearl Harbor was on the 7th, and the 8th he went down to enlist.
But didn't you have problems getting in at first?
I sure did.
Well, talk up and say what they told you.
I went down there, and they asked you what you wanted to go into, and I said, I want to go into intelligence. So there were days that it didn't go 1, 2, 3. I guess they checked you out. So they sent me to Washington. At that time, it was the Navy building. The Pentagon wasn't built yet. So I go there, and they asked me my name and where I came from. And they said, where were you born? I said, Lithuania. So they said, we don't want any fucking foreigners here.
They sent him home, but they sure called you back in a couple of months.
I don't think it took a couple of months.
They were calling right
and
back.
back.
Now, how did your family feel about you wanting to enlist?
I don't know, we didn't talk about it. I can only tell you that I got a notification to be sworn in, and that same day I took my mother home from the hospital. She had cataract. And I said, Ma, I took you home, thank God you're feeling good. Now I have to go. Where are you going? I'm in the Navy. And I went down to the Navy. Should I keep going on the Navy?
Yeah.
So they gave you a chit right down from the post office. And it was like a white coffee pot, but it wasn't a white. And then I ate my first T-bone steak. And from there they took you to the pier, and they put you on a boat, and we went to Norfolk. And I was in the last platoon, 247. Usually, if I remember correctly, it's almost a 6-month training. Ropes and knives and all kinds of things. We were there 3 weeks. God Street, 3 weeks. And they already assigned some fellas. They went right aboard ship as apprentice seamen. And me, they sent to Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, University of Illinois. Yeah, I went to college. When we left, they said you were an honorary graduate. But I'll tell you one thing, that corn that they had in Illinois, I'll never forget. It was really great. Now, while I was in there, we got paid, first it was $21 a month. And we had to pay for our own insurance. And that was $10. Every 2 weeks we got paid, so the first 2 weeks, unless I got somebody from Michael or somebody, I stayed around. And then the next 2 weeks, I went to Chicago. Chicago was great, unbelievably. People were so nice. You had Mayor Kelly's, he was the mayor at that time, Kelly. Mayor Kelly's Servicemen Center, and you had the USO. Didn't have to pay for streetcars, jump up, jump down, anyway. And you went there and they had passes. You want to go to a ball game, here's a pass. You want to go there. They even had the Palmer House. I don't know if it's still there or what, but they had just a certain amount of rooms, not the whole hotel. $1 a night. As God is my judge, I can't tell you where I slept one night. I was there for 3-4 months. Don't know.
The wartime was
we
just
used
so
to go
different.
on the street. You want to go to church with me? Well, I can't go either. So they said, please come over to our house for lunch. Tell us where we'll pick you up. Now, I don't mean
so
just me. Anybody.
So you were in uniform as you're walking around.
That time you had to wear your uniform.
Yeah.
The only time I didn't wear my uniform is when I came home. And I was supposed to wear it then. I didn't want to wear it.
How come?
Don't ask me.
But, you know, the atmosphere, the whole country was just so different during World War II. Where
What's going on with...
everybody was, you know, everybody was into this war. And, you know, like, like, for instance, I think I had mentioned before, when I went to the hospital to work, and I would get out about 9 o'clock at night and just casually would stand up on Packer Street by myself to get a streetcar to go home. You know, it's hard for you all to even visualize that feeling of just openness. You know, very often from home, if I wanted to go downtown, you know, just to hitch a ride and get into a car and somebody, you know, will just take us wherever we wanted to go. It was just the whole atmosphere just was so different during World War II.
But I'll tell you, from University of Illinois, they shipped us back to the East Coast, Solomon's Island, to take amphibious training. I tipped them off that we were going to be so-and-so.
Yeah.
No, at that...
Solomon's Island?
Solomon's Island. They came in. It was Blummer, my mother, who drove.
I have no
Michael,
idea. I have no idea.
Whoever it was. They wouldn't let me to go out or them to come in.
Yeah.
I saw them through a barbed wire fence.
And then there was one time when you told us something about Washington, and we went over to Washington, and you left the day before. Yeah, yeah.
But we went on trains at that time from World War I. They didn't have lights, kerosene lights, and we used to take the back of the seats and put it on the floor, and that's where we slept. And they had a car, one end to the other. You walked through, and that's where you had your food, and we were dirty.
Now, that was when you went on the train to go out to the West Coast? Did you go all the way out to the West Coast on that train?
A couple times we were on that kind of train. But anyway, I went to the signal school, and that was also, how long was I there? About a month and a half.
Where was that also?
At University of Illinois. And we were supposed to have been there like a 6-month course. So I was a third-class petty officer then. I was a big shot. As long as I was in the service, never had KP duty, you know, because of the circumstances. And I never had watches. You know. I could designate somebody else, but I never had watches. That's one thing. I was always my own boss. Always my own boss. You know, to a certain extent. You know, but one of the best things I did in the entire time I was in the Navy, and I was commended for it, and I should have gotten it. Well, anyway. We were at BIAC, B-I-A-K. Quiet, just like we're sitting here, nothing going on. And this guy from the Naval Academy, Scruggs, he said, have a pointer at the gun, and he had others chipping the decks. That's one thing, the ships were clean, chipping the decks, and we're unloading. We're unloading. I looked at him, and it didn't sound kosher to me. It didn't make sense. And I'm on the top deck in the conning tower, and I looked up, and I see some goddamn planes. I couldn't tell you. See, we were on the beach, bunch of trees, so you couldn't see very far. And I see these planes coming, and their guns were going. God's true. Well, it's in the records. I jumped down. I went about 1, 2, 3, 4 steps, and I jumped down, opened the door. You don't talk that way. And I set the alarm. And setting the alarm, the pointer starts shooting the planes. And after I set the alarm, I ran right back and I stayed up there. And the officers had all started coming. And hadn't I done that, if I have to say myself, that whole damn place would have been, because we had gasoline, we had ammunition, we had everything,
They were able to get those planes? Were they able to get those planes?
We got a couple of them. But that wasn't it.
Yeah.
That was...
And nobody said anything to you about it?
Yeah, but I got a couple of accommodations. They couldn't say too much. Why couldn't they say? Where in the hell were they? If they put it in the log and it goes to the Navy Department and somebody reads it and here a stinking old sailor, in the Navy maybe a year's time by then, did all that, where were they? So they couldn't write but so much.
And how long were you at sea?
I had about 2 years sea duty altogether. I was in Pacific Strait about 20 months.
You're just out at sea for 20 months straight.
20 months. We went to Sydney, Australia. The ship collected barnacles, and we had a long way to go. So what they did, they sent out a floating dry dock. In other words, what we did was we pumped all the water out of the ship so it rose. The dry dock, they loaded, and we went into this dry dock, and they took about maybe 10 of us, from the whole crew, 10 of us, because we came. I was a plank owner. I brought the ship, but I was one of the few and a couple others that came a little later.
Plank owner is the original.
Plank owners.
Yeah, they're the original ones that are on the ship.
But outside of that, I was out there all the time. It got so that a few times we had beer parties. I wouldn't even go out there. At first, I used to go out with an officer, and I had a .45. Didn't know how to shoot it. Didn't know how to lock it up. That is the safety. I sent somebody else instead of me. Of course, I went to the officer and I asked him.
When did you enter the Navy?
I entered the Navy, I think it was May 42, and came out October 45, late October. But I had a good record.
Can I interject a cute little story afterwards? That we were in Hawaii for vacation.
It was our
40th anniversary, we went to Hawaii, and you know, Philip had gone through Hawaii on the way out to the Pacific. When we were coming home, we were seated.
Pardon me. When I went to Hawaii, they were still bringing out bodies from the Arizona that was laying there sideways.
It was from D-Day.
From D-Day. And they had the West Virginia that was also hit. And there they were using it, you know, for the help that were working on the dry docks and everything. They would go eat there, use the toilets there.
So we were in the airport coming home at that time, and there was this Polynesian woman that was sitting next to Philip and struck up a conversation. You were here on vacation. Did you have a nice time? And yes, we had a wonderful time. But Philip said, I'm just a little disappointed because I was here 40 years ago, and I just wanted to see some things that I sort of remembered from 40 years ago. You were here 40 years ago, she said. And Dad said, yes. Daddy, you've come home. And she literally grabbed him. So he said, they wouldn't let me off the ship. I know, my mother swam out. I said that was the best part of our trip.
Couldn't recognize
we had,
Couldn't recognize
we hugged and we kissed and we got.
So you get back from the Navy.
Oh, actually, you said sometimes you had Army Rangers come on board in the Navy?
We had Rangers, we had Aussies, we had the the Rats of Tobruk. They were in South Africa, and
you also brought back a lot of.
And then we brought back the Rangers.
And you brought back.
The Rangers were there before us. They could take leaves from the dew off of plants and know which ones were mushrooms, which ones were poisonous, and which were. But don't mess with them. They stayed in a group all by themselves.
And didn't you bring back prisoners, Japanese prisoners?
Prisoners. Oh no.
Yeah.
They got treated better than us.
Mm-hmm.
And Zadie, wasn't there something with Passover on the ship? Weren't you able to get matzah? I thought you. Maybe I
never heard that.
Misheard that story.
No.
No.
Was there something like when people were on one of the islands? There was something with food in the islands.
Yeah, never heard that.
I kind of remember something.
I remember these women used to come with their, I would call it more like a canoe, but it wasn't a canoe, with skirts, period.
Grass skirts.
And it didn't appeal to me. I wouldn't give them a cigarette.
I used to ask for grass skirts.
Maybe kosher wine or something that you got? Somebody sent something? Did your mother used to send something?
You used to take, yeah, that's right, I forgot. We got salamis.
Yeah.
It was all
green.
Don't forget, we were out in the Pacific. It was hot. You know, white. What do you call it?
It was
mold.
Mold. You know, scraped it off, ate it. What do you call it? From Wisconsin, there was a fellow, venison. They used to get that, fellas. You know. But I shared mine. Always shared.
And Zadie, then you got into an argument with one of your.
Well, we won't talk about it. You want to know? I'll tell you what happened. See, when we got underway, indirectly, I was the boss. First of all, I was the only one that went to signal school. You know, in all hospitals.
On the entire ship? You were the only one?
One that went to signal school.
Right.
Not engineering or
I know.
electrical.
You were the only, right.
Signal school.
Well, excuse me, Dad. What would happen if something happened to you? Would they have other signalmen?
They say Shema Yisrael. But anyway, they used to send me up kids from time to time. And I used to train them. And I worked day and night, really, figuratively speaking. You remember when we went on one of those conventions and this fella pointed to me, he said, he was my boss, Charlie.
Yeah.
Charlie. And, Charlie Earl. Well, anyway, and I used to stand by there, and the captain used to tell me, he said, let's get underway. And I used to say, unit, stand by. Unit, dog, love, going up. And I had to check, let me go backwards. A flotilla is 36 ships. We were flagship of a squad called 20. Flotilla 7, squad 20. There was squad 20, 21, 22. When we pulled, that's 12 ships. When we pulled out, we were by ourselves, the 12 ships. The rest were nearby, but, So we pulled out. The captain said, get on their way. No, prepare to get on their way. Peter, unit, dog, love. Hold on, Then I used to see if all 12 ships, if it was up the halyard, that means they received the message and they understood it. And I used to go back to it again. I forget. I said, Captain, all acknowledged. Mm-hmm. There's a different terminology. I forget it right now. And we had zigzag plans, the times of it. It was really a big deal. And flags were flying up and down. First they had to go up, then you had to pick them up,
they couldn't
put
use
them
any
in a flag bag.
radio because it would be picked up by the Japanese.
And they didn't want lights. It was all flags mostly. Semaphore. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I got
Semaphore. We use semaphore.
You're good.
So anyway, all of a sudden we had a big shot that came out of, they called them 90-day wonders. And he was supposed to be the communication, which he was the communication of it. So he comes up, well, the other guys, all of a sudden, the other guys, they went along with me because they really didn't know. So this guy comes up and he says, I'll give the order. Well, he's an officer, so he gives the order. Well, anyway, he got stuck. He didn't know shit. And the flags were all over. And I'm standing back here. So he said, Marcus, get this straightened out. I said, fuck you. You fucked it up, you fix it. Captain called me over.
They asked you what your rank was?
Oh, yeah, later on. He said, what's your... No, he said, no, what one? He said, what's your rate?
Right.
I said, second and first class. He said it was.
It was.
But in 3 weeks to the next payday, I got it back.
And that,
But the officer, when we hit port coming back, he got transferred. I should have been court-martialed, and this guy should have stayed. They got rid of it, and somebody went in the wheelhouse and started blowing the horn.
and by the way, we've met him at one of our conventions. Nice fellow. Nothing was ever talked about that. We were friendly. I was friendly with his wife for a while.
I guess I was almost all my life on my own. I don't think I could have lasted long working for somebody. No, I knew my place. We had this fella that was Commander Scrusky was a full captain. In fact, we called him Commodore. Commodore was a low rank. But I had no problems.
And how many evasions were you in there?
13. Some of them were just like we're sitting here. Nothing. Some of them were hell. We had all kinds. I kind of forget. We had destroyers coming right alongside of us with 5-inch guns going pop, 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 pop. And we hit a beachhead, and you had World War I. The Fifth Fleet was, I don't know if you remember the names, like Admiral Halsey and Sprang, and, they were the big boys, But we had World War II battle wagon, but they had 16-inch guns. And when those things flew over your head, you didn't know whether they were coming at you or back at you.
And so you were also transporting?
We used to have between, 400 to 600 troops and all that ammunition.
And the tanks that had to go off.
We had tanks. We even had airplanes sometimes. When I say airplanes, they were spotters. Spotters. They took off the wings, so they could go like that. And what they did, you had Seabees on the beach. No, they didn't come later. But anyway, we had screens, and they put the screens on the beach, and that was the
Runway.
when the plane takes off from the runway. They used that as a runway. And what they did, they signaled to whom, I don't know, so the battle wagons would know where to hit what. Yeah, it was all kinds of crap.
I was just going to say, I think we're down to like 3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, say something nice. Exert yourself.
We'll continue because I still like to hear about you guys get married and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Well, that was good, wasn't it?
I want to hear more about Grandma Papa's involvement with the community and Israel.
Absolutely.
That'll be
Well, let me end things here.
Okay. I think this release was made the 21st day of November, 1921, by and between Ella Haskins of Baltimore City, the state of Maryland, party of the first part, and Etta Cohen, my grandmother, of Baltimore City, state of Maryland, and Mrs. I.J. Mazer of Burlington, state of North Carolina, my mother, parties of the second part. Whereas the said Ella Haskins was engaged by Etta Cohn to be employed by Mrs. I.J. Mazer in the city of Burlington, state of North Carolina. And whereas the said Ella Haskins has left the employee of Mrs. I.J. Mazer, and a controversy has arisen as to the amount of wages due her, and also as to the cost of the transportation to and from Baltimore and Burlington, and whereas the said Ella Haskins has agreed to accept the sum of $10 in full settlement of all of her claims against the said Etta Cohn and Mrs. I.J. Mazer. Now, therefore, this release witnessed that in the consideration of the premises and the sum of $10 in hand paid to the said Ella Haskins, the receipt of which is hereby acknowledged, the said Ella Haskins does hereby release, discharge, and forever exonerate the said Etta Cohn and Mrs. I.J. Mazer from any and all claims which she has against the said Etta Cohn and Mrs. Mazer from the creation of the world to the present date. The said Ella Haskins hereby declaring herself fully satisfied and contained. Witnesses in hand and seal of the said Etta Haskins this 18th day of November 1921.